Among the most epic structures to be found on this planet, bridges are among the giants. These technical masterpieces have become more and more complex and impressive, spanning ever larger divides. But even these marvels of engineering need a little tender loving care. In this episode, we'll explore two exciting bridge projects. The Skanska project, renovating the George Washington Bridge, with 300,000 vehicles crossing every day.
You can see the traffic down here. Again, I mentioned really one of our biggest challenges working with this traffic.
Öresund Bridge spans the straits between the south of Sweden and the north of Denmark. When the bridge opened in 2000, the plan was for it to last 100 years. Now the Öresund Bridge Consortium aims to double that lifespan to 200 years, with the vision of running the world's most sustainable bridge.
We have this vision, so I hope that could be a good example for other bridges and motorways. Equip them with solar cells, solar energy plants.
New York. It's a city of bridges. With its 5 boroughs spread out over 4 landmasses, it's estimated to have more than 2,000 bridges, big and small. Many of New York's bridges were built back in the 1800s or early in the 1900s. As vital arteries for this city that never sleeps, they need almost constant maintenance and even major renovations.
So we'll walk up the stairs here. We installed a viewing platform that will give you views of the, be careful, give you views of the bridge.
On a recent visit, I caught up with Jen Bieland, Senior Project Manager with the Skanska project, renovating the George Washington Bridge, New York's largest, which stretches across the Hudson River, connecting Washington Heights with Fort Lee in New Jersey.
Watch out for that step.
And there she is.
Here's the bridge.
So now we're walking out on the main level of the bridge, the top floor, if you like. 8 lanes of traffic roaring past us here. There are 6 lanes of traffic underneath on the bottom floor. On this level, we're 65 meters above the water level.
So these are the suspender ropes. We've changed out all of the ones on the north side thus far. We're probably halfway through the quantity on the south side. All the lighting here we installed. These are historical panels that really give you the history of the bridge.
The Restore the George project is a huge undertaking, and Jen's pride is obvious.
It's an iconic structure, and I'm so proud of the work that our team is doing here. It's really one of the jobs of a lifetime, I think.
Skanska's US Civil team in New York is busy replacing 592 suspension ropes and rehabilitating and protecting the 4 main suspension cables. By the way, those cables weigh 28,000 tons each.
Yes, it's a lot.
It's a double-decked suspension bridge. Can you describe for the listeners what that means?
Sure, that's simply just a suspension bridge that has 2 levels or decks for traffic, either vehicular, rail, or pedestrian traffic. This bridge actually is a double-deck bridge for vehicular traffic only. More than 300,000 vehicles pass over the bridge every day, making it the world's busiest bridge. It's the only 14-lane suspension bridge in the world. And another fun fact, the bridge is also home to the world's largest free-flying American flag. Port Authority flies this flag 9 days during the year. Some holidays are Memorial Day, Flag Day, 4th of July, and September 11th, to name a few.
How do you renovate something like the busiest bridge in the world?
You can see on the south side there's platforms underneath the main cables. We have them all the way across the bridge. It allows our crews to work safer. Right? No issue with dropped objects. They don't have to be tied off while they're up there. So it really does feel like you're on solid ground.
Otherwise it would be terrifying being up there.
Yes.
I guess they're trained for working at height.
They are, but I'm afraid of heights. And when you're up there, you feel like you're on the ground. So
They're inspecting and rehabilitating those 4 main cables and installing a dehumidification system.
So the dehumidification system that we're installing for the main cables will blow dry air through the cables from the New York anchorage through the main cables across the bridge to the New Jersey anchorage. So this dry air will prohibit rust and corrosion of the wires, therefore extending the life of the bridge. And it's supposed to extend their life by 80 years.
What do you think that this project will mean for the people of New York and New Jersey? This is a vital piece of infrastructure for the community.
Absolutely. Under this contract, we're constructing ADA-compliant bicycle and pedestrian access ramps on both the north and south sides of the bridge. The sidewalks that we're installing allow wheelchairs and those with mobility issues to see the views that wasn't available to them in the past. That's a shared use path between pedestrians and bicyclists.
And the cyclists no longer have to carry their bikes up flights of stairs, you were saying?
No, it's certainly much easier. They do have to pedal up a ramp, but it's considerably better than going up a flight of stairs. These shared use paths has had a positive impact on the surrounding community, encouraging more sustainable means of crossing the river, either walking or bicycling.
What are the biggest challenges that you face in a major project like this?
This is a very busy bridge in a very congested area. So really our biggest challenge is completing our work within the available lane closure restrictions while minimizing impacts to the traveling community.
So how do you manage those lane closures? And you said there are also several other projects going on at the same time. And how do you coordinate between all of them so that you're avoiding disruption as much as possible?
The owner coordinates the lane closures. We are allowed a single lane closure during the day shift. For those scopes of work that require more significant lane closures, closing an entire level, that work has to be done at night. Those lane closures are limited with limited hours. So it is definitely a challenge.
It's a huge undertaking. How many people from Skanska are on this project?
Right now, we have probably over 120 Skanska people, including craft, on the project. Probably during this construction season, including our subcontractors, we'll have well over 150 to 175 people on the project.
What's the ramp over there?
This is a platform we haven't raised yet. If you look up here, we have two still going to the towers. So probably next weekend or the weekend after, we'll raise these last two platforms.
Following up on that, I assume, as always on Skanska projects, there's a real focus on safety.
Absolutely. That's obviously our biggest priority, and not just for our crews, but for the traveling public, for the owner. A lot of goals and planning goes into everything that we do here. This is very narrow through here, be careful.
The George Washington Bridge is a real New York landmark. You can see it from miles away. Jen, your pride in Restore the George is obvious to anyone who meets you. What got you into bridges? Why do you do this?
When I was growing up, my parents owned a small machine shop that we fabricated and installed movable bridge machinery. So every night around the dinner table, my parents would share their experiences during the day, what projects they were working on, who they interacted with, and it was really interesting. I worked at that machine shop for 20 years before I came to Skanska, and it really just is a carryover of what I was learning from my parents working at the machine shop.
So it's been bridges ever since?
It's been bridges since the beginning, so, yeah.
It's huge. The scale is mind-blowing.
Yes, it's if you're here during a sunrise, though, it's absolutely beautiful.
Does it ever get quiet?
No. And we talked about the flag.
Yeah.
So from the New Jersey tower here, if you see that hole in the bottom of the arch, the flag comes out of there, and it hangs down. It hangs down from there. It's beautiful. It's huge.
Of course, this bridge isn't just a bridge. When that flag, the world's largest free-flying flag, is hoisted on special occasions, it fills the archway formed by the tower at one end. It's a real celebration of the American spirit. Jen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Bridges really do bring us together. Not just feats of engineering, they are testaments to society's ability and desire to unite. Every arch, cable and beam bears witness to the ingenuity and determination of those who dare to transform the impossible into awe-inspiring reality. From solid stone bridges to soaring suspension bridges and arches that seem to float in the air. So what does it take to create such a marvel, and then keep it in good shape for years? Öresund Bridge spans the straits between the south of Sweden and the north of Denmark. It's the very first land connection between these two ancient rivals who are now close allies. The bridge has even created a new region, allowing efficient transport between the Danish capital of Copenhagen and the Swedish city of Malmö. Incidentally, the city where Skanska was founded way back in 1887. Skanska built the bridge itself. It is 7,800 metres long with 2 traffic lanes in each direction, as well as double train tracks below the road. The connection also consists of an artificial island with a tunnel and adjoining roadways. When the bridge opened in 2000, the plan was for it to last 100 years. Now, the Öresund Bridge Consortium aims to double that lifespan with the vision of running the world's most sustainable bridge. Bengt Hergard is the property director with the consortium. Bengt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you describe the bridge for our listeners? It's not just a simple bridge, but it's much more complex than that.
Yeah, we call it the Öresund Bridge, but in fact it's 8 kilometers of a bridge, 4 kilometers of an artificial island, and then it's 4 kilometers of an immersed tunnel.
The bridge has become very important to the people living in the Öresund region. Can you talk a little bit about what its effects have been, how significant it's been over the past 20 years?
Yeah, the political dream behind the bridge was to create a common labor and housing market and to collaborate culturally and economically across the strait that is called Öresund. And so far we have been in here for 24 years, and we can see signs of integration. We can see a huge potential for even more integration. But you can see now we have approximately 16,000 people commuting back and forth to work on the other side. And before the bridge, it was below 1,000. So obviously there is something happening in the region.
Definitely. I mean, this was the first land connection between the two countries, so it's very significant. The original plan was for the bridge to stand for around 100 years. Now, the Öresund Bridge Consortium aims to double that lifespan to 200 years. How are you going to do that? And please, get into the specifics here.
Yeah, starting with the reason. The reason is actually sustainability. I think the most sustainable action we can do is to prolong the service life, because building the construction phase of such a mega project is giving a large footprint. So if we can extend the lifetime, then that's the most sustainable we can do. So that's the reason. And what we are trying to achieve is to develop a maintenance plan, long-term maintenance plan, in order to secure 200 years instead of the design life 100 years. And we do that together with Lund University, a university in south of Sweden. And first thing to do is to identify those critical substructures of the bridge and the tunnel, of course, that decides or defines the service life. So everything that is replaceable is, in this sense, uninterested. The next phase is to try to find out what threats do we have to those substructures. What is the threat that put the lifetime in danger? And it could be corrosion, it could be fatigue or something else. And when you have understood that, then you can see if that threat, is that detectable? Could you measure it in some way? Can you see it? Is it protectable to avoid the threat to develop? And then finally, if it's happened, is it repairable? So we go in a systematic way through the whole structure, all substructures, and see what we can do. And then eventually it will be a future maintenance plan in order to deal with those threats in order to prolong the service life.
I can imagine that maintenance on this never stops, that it started on day 2 and it's going to continue it forever.
Yeah.
How long do you think the bridge will be standing? I know the working life is now 200 years, but I mean, it's a pretty mighty construction. How long do you think it'll be there?
Yeah, I definitely think it will be there for more than 200 years. My guess is that when it will be closed, it will be due to other needs in the society rather than the design. The technique is setting the limit. I think it's more how the society will be developed. How do you do transportation in 200, 300 years? You can only guess.
We're talking about this the consortium aiming to make this the world's most sustainable bridge. I mean, obviously extending the lifespan reduces the impact, as you mentioned. But what other aspects are there that are going into making this the world's most sustainable bridge?
We think that availability of the bridge in order to promote integration between Sweden and Denmark, that's a very important factor. So if we can develop the bridge in a way that it is always open, to remove technique from and equipment from the road and the railroad area in order to have it open even under maintenance, that's important. To minimize the risk for severe casualties, both in the traffic and on the workplace. Remove CO2 emissions, both in the traffic and within the operation. And finally, we think that to be good citizens, to helping people on both sides of the bridge in their everyday life, and especially people that is far from the labor market. If we can do that, I think we're qualified to be in the final for the most sustainable bridge in the world.
My money's on you. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges in achieving that? And can we say how far off are you now? How far away is that goal?
Yeah, it's a vision, and you never know if you have reached the vision. But I would say that CO2 emission from our operation, I think we have come far there. But then, of course, if you look at the bridge, and then you will also see the CO2 emission from the traffic from our customers. So I think that will be essential and the most tricky part for us to achieve. We have started to measure how many electrical vehicles passing, and we can see when we started in January 23, it was 7%, and now it's already 12%. So it's a good increase, but from a very, very low level.
What about the bridge's own energy consumption and emissions? I think there's been some work going on reducing your energy consumption there.
Yeah, that's correct. And I usually says that in the past we were unconsciously sustainable, and we want to be more consciously sustainable. Because when we reduced energy consumption, we thought more on cost than on sustainability. But in fact, the first year we consumed 12.7 million kilowatt hours to run the bridge and the tunnel. And last year we consumed 5.3 million. So it's a huge reduction. And the next step is to produce as much green energy ourselves. So now we have developed 2 solar cell plants, solar energy plants, and I would say that we are now up in the level of 45% of our consumption.
Wow. So you've more than halved your consumption, and now you're producing a lot of that energy sustainably.
Yeah, and I think it's surprisingly, but that infrastructure have been not used as a platform for green energy. So I hope that could be a good example for other bridges and motorways that equip them with solar cells, solar energy plants. Are
these solar panels on, because you built an artificial island, Pepperholm, Are the solar panels on there?
Yeah, the major part is out on Pepperholm.
I'm also intrigued in regards to the biodiversity. I've heard that Pepperholm has become a little bit of an oasis.
Yeah, starting off as artificial island, what's living there had come there on their own. And I think that people around us, they think we are ridiculously interested in the fauna and wildlife on Pepperholm. So things growing on Pepperholm that you can't see in Sweden or Denmark otherwise. And you can also have very rare small spiders and frogs and such things. So we are very proud of Pepperholm.
And I've also read that the vegetation is binding carbon dioxide.
Yeah, it does. We didn't know that from the beginning, but our calculation is that it's now binding more than the operation emits.
No, it sounds amazing. You mentioned about how you've improved the energy efficiency. Are there any particular lessons that we've seen there with things that you've been able to change the way you're doing them now? Maybe ways that you would have changed the original design if we knew what we knew today?
I think that when you design a tunnel, especially that the tunnel is consuming much energy, but I think that when designing, you don't look at operating cost as much as you should. So we have a lot of unnecessary equipment. It's over capacity on things. So what we have done over the first 24 years is removing equipment. We don't need that many jet fans in the tunnel as was designed and so on. So always asking the question when you're going to replace something, do we actually need this? And do we need that many? So I think that's the thing that we have done that have given the most effect.
I think it's really interesting. Obviously, when you're building something so new, there's a risk that it gets over-engineered because we want to be 100% or 120% sure that it's safe and efficient and all that sort of stuff. But really interesting lessons that you've learned. I'd like to move to a little bit of a softer aspect, if we can. I mean, I've read various articles in the newspapers about friendships and even romances that have come up with people from either side of the bridge. Have you got any good examples of that?
I can tell you a story about two teenagers in Denmark that were tired of going to school and they didn't want to go to the next stage, the upper secondary school. And then they saw on YouTube a skateboarder from Denmark that went to a more cultural school in Malmö, Sweden, and that ended up that they now commuting back and forth to school in Malmö, and they are studying film and photo. So I think that's a cute story.
Oh, that's fantastic. I guess that's building up that entire Öresund region there and with all the different synergies happening there. Thank you so much, Bengt. Really great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Building bridges has long been a metaphor for connecting people and communities. It's been fascinating to hear about how maintaining these bridges is just as important for ensuring these vital, sustainable connections endure and continue connecting people for centuries ahead. Thank you for listening. And special thanks to our guests, Bengt Haggert and Jen Bieland, for joining us today on Shaping Sustainable Places. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out in the future. And if you've got any thoughts about this episode or ideas for new ones to come, don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@skanska.com. We'd love to hear from you. This is a podcast from Skanska, a leading property development and construction group. To find out more about how we and others are creating healthy, resilient communities and spaces, visit us at foresight.skanska.com. I'm John Ambrose. Thanks for joining us as we explore shaping sustainable places.